Ladies and gentlemen, today we explore not just strength, but self-mastery, not just ambition, but boundaries, because the truth is, a high-value woman is not just built, she's forged what sets her apart. She doesn't just watch the clock, she guards it. To her, time isn't something you casually give away, it's something you invest with intention. Every minute is energy, every hour is a piece of her purpose. So when someone says, "Can I borrow just a second?" she understands the hidden cost behind that question, because seconds become minutes, minutes become hours, and hours become a life that doesn't belong to her anymore. She used to say yes to everything until she realized that constantly saying yes to others was silently saying no to herself. She was running on empty, pleasing the world while starving her own soul. That's when she made a decision to stop treating her time like it was unlimited, because it's not, it never was. She realized that every yes that wasn't aligned with her truth was robbing her of a deeper yes, the kind that builds the life she actually wants. She doesn't fear being busy, but she fears being busy with the wrong things. She's not interested in urgency, she's interested in alignment. She doesn't rush for people who wouldn't walk for her. She doesn't drop everything to prove she's available. She knows that busyness is not a badge of honor, it's often a red flag of misalignment. She doesn't need to be everywhere, for everyone, at all times. She needs to be exactly where her energy is respected and her presence is purposeful. There was a time when she'd feel guilty for saying no, as if protecting her calendar made her selfish, but now she sees clearly, self-respect isn't selfish. She learned that you can be kind and unavailable. You can be generous and say no. You can love people without giving them unrestricted access to your day. She understands now that her peace doesn't require permission. Her boundaries don't need to be explained. If someone feels entitled to her time, they were never really interested in her. They were interested in her compliance. She no longer books her life solid just to feel valuable. She doesn't need back meetings, endless commitments, or constant noise to validate her worth. Sometimes her calendar says unavailable, not because she's doing something, but because she's doing nothing, and that nothing is everything. It's her rest, her reset, her breath. The world may call it lazy. She calls it essential, because she knows now, burnt out is not brave, exhausted is not noble, and empty is not a status symbol. She prioritizes what matters before the world shouts what's urgent. She doesn't wait for the crash to start setting boundaries. She builds them early, calmly, and without apology, because if she doesn't protect her time, someone else will plan it for her, and she's done letting other people write her schedule like it's their story. She chooses her mornings with care, no more scrolling through other people's lives before she's centered in her own. She doesn't reply to texts the second they come in, because urgency is not a personality trait, it's a trap. She answers when it serves her rhythm, not when it serves their impatience, because she's no longer performing availability to earn validation. She knows her worth isn't measured in how quickly she replies, but in how deeply she shows up when she does. Her time is her boundary line, and that line is bold, because the moment she learned that not everyone deserves her energy, everything changed. She stopped entertaining conversations that go nowhere. She stopped filling her day with people who only drain. She stopped going to events out of guilt, replying to invitations out of fear, and saying yes to things that made her feel small. Now she fills her life like a curated gallery, not a public space. Every commitment is a choice, not an obligation. She values time because she's tasted regret. She's wasted hours trying to fix things that were never her responsibility. She's spent nights rehearsing conversations she never should have had. She's lived days on autopilot, working someone else's dream, but not anymore. Now, she's intentional, she's present, she's awake, and that awareness has become her armor. What changed? She stopped asking, "Do they like me?" and started asking, "Does this align with who I am?" She stopped chasing everyone else's urgency and started honoring her own rhythm, because she finally realized every time she says yes to something that doesn't matter, she says no to something that does. And for a woman who has built her life around purpose, integrity, and peace, there's no more room for waste. Her time is sacred. It is not negotiable. It is not casual. It is not free. It is hers, and that's the most powerful thing she'll ever own. Would you like to follow this with the other boundary sections written in a similar tone? No tolerance for disrespect, written in the same emotionally rich, professional tone. There are no subheadings or conclusions, as you requested. The language is powerful, expressive, and deeply realistic. She doesn't raise her voice to match disrespect. She lowers her presence and walks away, because once upon a time she used to tolerate it. She would let the jokes slide. She would brush off the dismissive comments. She'd justify someone's rude behavior as just their personality. She'd smile to keep the peace, swallow the sting of someone's words, and tell herself it wasn't that serious. But it was that serious, because every moment she tolerated being spoken to like she didn't matter, a piece of her self-respect quietly slipped through her fingers. She no longer calls it being patient. She calls it what it is: abandonment. She doesn't excuse cruelty just because it came wrapped in charm. She doesn't justify rudeness just because it came from someone with power. She doesn't let someone's title, paycheck, or charisma blur the reality of how they treat her. She learned the hard way. You can love someone and still be disrespected by them. You can admire someone and still have to protect yourself from them. You can be strong and still be deeply wounded by the tone someone uses when they speak your name. Now, she listens closely, not just to what people say, but to how they say it, the energy, the intention, the undertone, because respect isn't about politeness. It's about presence. It's about consistency. It's about whether someone honors your boundaries when you're tired, vulnerable, or no longer useful to them. She no longer lets words confuse her when actions are crystal clear. If someone interrupts her, talks down to her, mocks her, ignores her, gaslights her, she doesn't wait for a pattern to form. 1 time is enough to make her pause. 2 is enough to make her leave. She doesn't entertain fixing someone who constantly crosses her emotional lines. She's not a rehabilitation center for people who never learned how to treat others with dignity. She's not a classroom for grown adults who refuse to learn respect. Her empathy does not mean access. Her kindness is not a ticket to mistreat her and expect her to stay. If you cross her boundary once, she'll communicate it. If you cross it twice, she'll correct it. If you cross it a 3rd time, you won't get the chance to do it again. There's no anger in her detachment, only clarity. When someone shows her that they are careless with her presence, she doesn't explode. She doesn't beg. She doesn't perform her pain in the hopes they'll finally see her worth. She just quietly removes herself. Because respect is not something you negotiate. It's not something you plead for. It's either there or it isn't. She's no longer impressed by apologies without changed behavior. I didn't mean it like that. No longer holds weight with her. You're too sensitive no longer makes her question her reality. That's just how I am no longer earns someone a pass to stay, because she knows now how someone treats you is who they are. And if they can't handle being held accountable for the impact of their actions, they don't belong near her life. She used to think being the bigger person meant staying quiet. Now she knows it means standing tall and walking away. She used to think she had to earn someone's respect. Now she knows she only has to demand it through how she respects herself. If someone makes her feel small, if they use sarcasm to sting, if they laugh at her dreams, if they dismiss her emotions, she doesn't second guess her reaction. She trusts her gut because intuition is rarely wrong. It's just inconvenient when we don't want to accept what it's trying to tell us. Her peace is too expensive to spend on people who make her feel anxious. Her self-worth is too rooted to be shaken by temporary validation. She doesn't need to prove she's worthy of being spoken to with care. She is worthy, and anyone who can't see that is simply not invited to stay. So now, when someone disrespects her, she doesn't engage in a war of words. She doesn't give them the satisfaction of emotional chaos. She doesn't try to make them understand. Instead, she exits quietly. Calmly, powerfully, because when you truly respect yourself, silence becomes a weapon, distance becomes a decision, and walking away becomes the loudest thing you'll ever say. She doesn't tolerate disrespect, not because she's cold or unkind, but because she finally knows what it means to love herself. And when a woman loves herself, there are some things she will never accept again. Not ever. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the next boundary in the same voice and length. Written with the same emotionally charged, realistic, and professional tone. No subheadings or conclusion, as you requested. She used to react to everything, the tone of someone's voice, a passive-aggressive text. A cold shoulder. One bad moment could ruin her whole day. Her emotions would spike like a wave, crashing over her sense of peace, and she'd drown in questions like, why did they say that? What did they mean? What did I do wrong? She'd give people full access to her internal world, even when they didn't deserve a place in it. But not anymore. Now she holds herself differently. There's a calmness to her that isn't accidental, it's earned. She doesn't explode when she's provoked. She doesn't beg when someone pulls away. She doesn't chase after explanations from people who made the choice to disrespect her. She's mastered the space between stimulus and response, and that space, that's where her power lies, because emotional control isn't about being detached. It's about being disciplined. She feels everything, but she doesn't let everything control her. There's a fire in her, but it no longer burns everything down. She's learned to pause, breathe, and then decide. Not everything deserves a reaction. Not everyone earns a response. Sometimes the most powerful thing she can do is stay still in the storm and choose silence over chaos. She understands now that people will try to get a rise out of her. Some people feed off the drama, the chaos, the reaction, but she's not in the business of feeding emotional parasites. If someone wants her peace, they better come with respect. Because once she sees that someone is trying to manipulate her energy, she pulls back, not to punish them, but to protect herself. There was a time when she believed expressing herself meant pouring out everything. Now she's careful with her vulnerability. She doesn't let temporary people witness permanent parts of her. Her emotions are not entertainment. Her softness is not a spectacle, and her silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. Because she knows exactly what she's doing when she holds back. She knows how much strength it takes to sit with an emotion instead of unleashing it recklessly, to cry in private, but walk in public like nothing's broken, to choose grace even when anger feels justified. She still feels hurt, still gets disappointed, still experiences moments where the old version of her wants to scream, break something, or spiral, but she no longer identifies with those impulses. She watches them rise, then watches them pass, because she's no longer reacting from her wounds, she's responding from her healing. She doesn't let others dictate the temperature of her inner world. Someone else's bad day doesn't become her burden. Someone else's rude comment doesn't control her mood. Someone ghosting her doesn't steal her self-worth. Emotional control means she chooses her state of mind every morning and protects it like it's sacred, because it is. It's her foundation, and she refuses to hand it over to someone who isn't even capable of managing their own. She's not numb, she's aware. She's not cold, she's conscious, and that distinction makes all the difference. Emotional control has taught her to observe, not absorb, to understand, not internalize, to process, not project. She doesn't lash out to feel powerful. She leans in to understand what her emotions are trying to tell her, then responds from a place of grounded self-respect. Some people mistake her composure for indifference. They think because she doesn't argue, she doesn't care, but they're wrong. It takes far more strength to remain composed than it does to react impulsively. Anyone can yell, anyone can vent, but to look someone in the eye who tried to hurt you and not flinch, that's power, that's maturity, that's evolution. She no longer gives away her peace just because the situation is uncomfortable. She knows conflict doesn't always require confrontation. And closure doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes closure is her decision to let it go, without drama, without explanation, without needing to be understood. Because she doesn't need the last word. She doesn't need to prove her point. She doesn't need to be louder to be heard. She just needs to be aligned with herself, her values, and her inner calm. That's the only validation that matters anymore. And so she protects her emotional space like it's sacred ground, because it is, and nothing enters it without intention, respect, and clarity. She's not perfect, but she's aware, and in that awareness, she's unstoppable. Would you like the next boundary expanded in the same style, selective access, selective access, continuing in the same emotionally powerful, professional tone. No subheadings or conclusion, just clean, compelling narrative. She's warm, but don't mistake her warmth for why. Open doors. She's kind, yes, but kindness is not a pass to walk into her life without invitation. She gives off light, but that doesn't mean everyone deserves to stand in her sun, because she's learned that too many people want proximity to her glow without the responsibility of handling her heart. And so now, access is earned. There was a time when she was an open book. She shared too quickly, trusted too soon, and let people in without question. She thought vulnerability meant full exposure, thought love meant letting her guard down completely, thought connection required constant availability. But then came the consequences, betrayals wrapped in charm, secrets repeated like gossip, energy drained by those who only came to take. And that's when everything shifted. Now she protects her inner world like it's sacred, because it is. Her stories, her thoughts, her softness, her silence. It's all hers, and not everyone gets a front row seat to her life. Not because she's cold or arrogant, but because she's clear. She knows not all attention is pure, not all closeness is love. Some people come close just to study your magic, not to protect it. Some people only show up when it's convenient for them, when you're shining, when they want something, when it benefits their narrative, and she's not here for that anymore. She doesn't overshare like she used to. Her peace doesn't need to be posted. Her pain doesn't need to be performed. She shares in silence, behind closed doors, with people who have earned the right to see her unfiltered. She understands now that intimacy is not just about touch or time. It's about trust. Who protects her name when she's not in the room? Who holds her truth with care, not curiosity? Who stays when she has nothing to offer but her presence? Selective access doesn't mean she has walls. It means she has standards. She doesn't cut people off out of ego. She cuts them off out of alignment. If the energy feels off, if the intentions seem unclear, if the patterns don't match the words, she pulls back, not to punish, but to protect. Because she's no longer interested in being someone's emotional project, backup plan, or occasional escape. If you're inconsistent with her, you won't get consistency from her. If you're half in, don't expect her to stay whole. She used to feel guilty for creating distance, used to think she owed people explanations for outgrowing connections, but not anymore. Now she knows that energy doesn't lie, and when her body tenses, her soul grows quiet, and her heart feels uncertain, she listens. Because not everyone who wants access deserves it. Some people want the benefits of her without the responsibility of her. They want her time, her listening, her loyalty, but they don't want to offer the same in return. She's done accepting crumbs just to keep the peace. Now she moves with discernment. She watches how people treat her when they no longer need her. She pays attention to who celebrates her in private, not just in public. She values those who check in without agenda, who show up without performance, who stay when things get quiet, because she doesn't need a crowd. She needs clarity. She doesn't crave noise. She craves depth. Her circle is smaller now, but it's solid. Less quantity, more quality. Fewer people, deeper roots. She's not lonely. She's intentional. She's not guarded. She's grown. And if that means some people feel uncomfortable around her boundaries, that's fine. Her goal isn't to make everyone comfortable. Her goal is to be safe in her own space. And sometimes that means saying no to last-minute plans, unanswered texts, fewer replies, and more solitude. Because the older she gets, the more she realizes that peace is not found in popularity. It's found in privacy. She doesn't need to broadcast every move. She doesn't need everyone to understand her. She knows who she is. She knows what she carries, and she knows that the most valuable parts of her will never be visible to just anyone. So if she gives you access, understand the honor in that. If she lets you see her, really see her, cherish it. Don't misuse it. Don't assume it. Don't take it for granted, because access to her world is not guaranteed, not promised, not permanent. It's a privilege, and the moment it feels unreciprocated, unappreciated, or unsafe, she will quietly step away. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Let me know when you're ready for the final expansion. Unapologetic standards. Unapologetic standards, written in the same emotionally resonant, powerful, and professional tone, with no subheadings or conclusion, as requested. She no longer lowers the bar just to make someone comfortable. She doesn't shrink her expectations to fit inside someone else's limitations. Her standards are not walls, they're windows, clear, firm, non-negotiable. She's not sorry for wanting more, and she's not afraid of being too much. Because for too long, she bent until it broke her. She tried to be understanding until she was unrecognizable. She made excuses for poor behavior and labeled it compromise. But now, that version of her is gone. There was a time when she thought having high standards would make her unlovable, too picky, too rigid, too intense. She believed the lie that asking for consistency, clarity, and effort made her demanding. So she settled, accepted half-hearted affection, tolerated blurred boundaries, chose potential over reality. She told herself that maybe she was expecting too much when really, she was just asking for the bare minimum: honesty, respect, and presence. But when those things started feeling like luxuries, she knew something had to change. Now she doesn't negotiate with her values. She doesn't explain why she expects to be spoken to with kindness, why she walks away from mixed signals, or why she doesn't entertain emotional laziness. She's not waiting to be chosen. She chooses herself every day. If someone wants to be in her life, they need to come correct, show up, be intentional, mean what they say, and follow through, because she's not here for maybes anymore. Not here for almost, not here for the gray areas people hide behind when they lack courage. She doesn't flinch when someone says she's hard to please. She smiles, because that's the point. She is hard to please if all you bring to the table is charm without substance. If you want access to her time, her energy, her loyalty, bring effort, bring consistency, bring truth. She's not here for emotional guessing games. If she has to wonder how you feel, she's already done. If you leave her questioning her worth, she'll leave you behind. There's a strength in the way she walks now, not arrogance, not entitlement, just self-knowledge, just alignment, just a quiet refusal to betray herself for connection. She doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't cling, love, friendship, business. Whatever the relationship is, if it requires her to dim her light or doubt her worth, it's not aligned. And if it's not aligned, she's not staying. She's not bitter. She's just finished explaining to people why self-respect isn't too much, why wanting consistency isn't controlling, why her silence doesn't mean she's cold. It means she's done repeating herself. She's no longer interested in building bridges for people who only show up to burn them. She's not handing out unlimited chances in the name of forgiveness. If someone crosses a line, they don't get to decide how far she should stretch. They don't get to rewrite her boundaries in the name of love or loyalty. She sets the terms now, and she doesn't apologize for it. She's not asking for perfect. She's asking for presence, for realness, for emotional maturity, and if someone can't meet her there, she won't lower herself to their level. She'll simply rise out of their reach. Her standards filter out the noise. They make it clear: if you're not here to build, don't show up to borrow. If you're not here to grow, don't ask to stay. If you can't handle a woman who knows her worth, don't pretend you can. She knows now that the right people won't be intimidated by her standards. They'll be inspired by them. They'll see them not as threats, but as an invitation to rise, as proof that she knows what she brings to the table, and she's not afraid to eat alone. She doesn't need to be validated, doesn't need to be softened, doesn't need to be told she's too much for the wrong person. She's not too much. She's just not for everyone, and she's okay with that, because she didn't come this far just to settle for less than she deserves. She didn't do all this healing just to tolerate someone else's chaos. She didn't rebuild herself piece by piece just to hand her heart to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. So if her standards scare someone, let them leave. If they feel threatened by her power, let them step aside. She's not here to make herself smaller just so someone else can feel big. She's not shrinking anymore, not silencing herself anymore, not folding in half just to fit inside someone's comfort zone. Her standards are her sacred ground, and she stands on them fully, freely, without apology.